If there is an illegitimate government, it would seem on the one hand to be immoral not to say that it's tyrannical or it's being unjust. But on the other hand, we're told rather clearly to submit. And Calvin makes this argument in the last chapter of the Institutes. So Calvin, interpreting Scripture with Scripture, looks at Romans 13. The civil magistrate is a minister of God. He's there for your good, not for your evil. It's rather clear. Now, what the question becomes then, what do we do if it would seem that the government is actually not there for your good? What if you're doing what is good and you're still afraid? Or what if you are doing what is bad and you're not afraid? Well, Calvin's position is that Romans 13, and I think this is a critical point, Romans 13 seems to describe the powers that are. It's not a prescriptive discussion in Romans 13, but it's a descriptive discussion. And so he looks at 1 Peter 2, for example, which has parallel language. And 1 Peter 2 rather uncomfortably points out that bond servants should be subject even to unjust masters. And so, I would point out that, Jeff, you mentioned that you're preaching through Romans 13. At some point, I don't mention it here in the article, but at some point I looked at John Murray's commentary on Romans, and this was, he states this there as well, that Romans 13 is a descriptive rather than a prescriptive discussion of civil magistrates. And so in some sense, at least according to Calvin, these things that we see in civil government are, they're enacting justice, even though we don't know how exactly, even if they're illegitimate. Now, I think it's rather clear that if, Acts, for example, if the civil government tells us to do something which is tantamount to sin, it is sin to obey. But that kind of disobedience is not resistance. That's disobedience. Civil resistance would be more of an organized action, whether by a public authority or a private conglomerate of people. And I think it's also important to distinguish between that kind of disobedience and civil disobedience. I mean, I think in its most technical sense, when we use the phrase civil disobedience, what comes to my mind is something more like Thoreau or some of Martin Luther King's writing, where he suggests that the purpose of civil disobedience is to go effectively to go out and find laws that are unjust and disobey them with the purpose of social change in mind, which is a little bit different than what if here in Virginia, the governor would say, you may never meet as a church again. Well, that's pretty clear cut about what we do at that point.
Sure.
And the point here is not that I'm trying to change I'm not trying to transform Virginia society. I'm trying to worship God.